So the first thing I want to ask you, does anybody have an opinion? How does New Jersey rank as contrasted with federal jurisdiction and federal legal principles, statutes, case law, as well as for 49 other states? What do you think? Good? Bad?
Probably pretty good.
Pretty good, says one back there. At the bottom. We're talking like on a scale of 1 is great, 50 is the worst. New Jersey, 49. You gave them a little wiggle room. Okay. Anybody else have an opinion? Because those are really the only two you could. Those are the extremes. So let's solve the puzzle. Sir?
All I can think of when you put that up was employment at will.
Okay, well, we'll get there. But
I'm thinking that all the states are the same.
Right. All the states are the same as far as, almost all. I'm going to say all. Everybody's got at will, and we're going to talk about at will. But this is a question of how does the state treat us as workers? What's the culture of protecting workers? New Jersey actually ranks probably a little bit below California, which most people think is just off the chart in terms of employment rights. New Jersey is really, really, really good. That's the good news. The bad news is employment law generally is not so good for employees. So it's the best sitting on top of a difficult system. We have some of the most protective laws for employees in the country. Civil rights, whistleblower, we'll talk a bit about that. And a number of areas, including health and welfare of citizens generally. Employment law is pretty good in this state. Okay, first question, how do you handle an illegal, unlawful employment interview question? Now, let's put a little context in that. Marty Lattman, I saw him speak at the library PSG program that David runs in Mercer in Princeton. And Marty is a character, and he's walking around, he says, most of you people are over the age of 50. That's the hidden elephant in the room. How do you deal with that? You walk in and say, I know what you're thinking. I'm old. But that's an advantage. And he proceeds to say why. And I raise my hand, I go, Marty, do you realize that the people who are interviewing you are never going to acknowledge what you just said? And imagine if what you do is not about age, it's about race or religion. Hi, I'm Catholic. You got a problem with that? You know, it's like, no, you do not do that. But this is really on the other side. They're asking you questions. And sometimes employers just don't know the law. So if they start asking you about things like, what are your plans for children? Do you have children? How many? There are lots of places where an employer could totally flunk the test. Now, some people think, and I heard it yesterday in Alex's program, somebody said, but the employer is allowed to say, the employer is not allowed to say, how much money are you looking for this position? This individual said, that's illegal. We know that's illegal. And I'm like, no, we don't know that's illegal. That's actually okay. They can do that. In fact, they can even ask you, unless it's the state of New Jersey, and I'm thinking a municipality as well, that you're looking for a job, they can say, what are you making in this position? What did you make in the last position? They can do that. How about this? We'd like to run, this is amazing. We'd like to run a background check on you. This is the first interview, and we're just saying that's what we routinely do, right? Anybody ever have that? Sure. What did you say?
Yes, sir.
Sure, go right ahead. They're not allowed to do that. New Jersey has a rule now that protects people who served their time and are now back in society, because as soon as they run the check and they ask you, well, what about the fact that you were busted 5 years ago on a drug charge or whatever, interview time is over. So New Jersey, this is a little weird. The employer's not allowed to look it up or ask you about it until you're at the last round and they're making a decision. Then they can say, we're going to run a background check. Here, great question.
Because usually they give you the application up front, which has that.
Excellent question. It's not a lawful question anymore. Now, good question. How do you answer that? I guess you do like NA, not answering. When we represent people in criminal cases and in municipal court that's quasi-criminal, we always tell people, as soon as the law permits it, file for an expungement. There is a one bite free way to do that. It has to be only one time. You can't get multiples of them. Maybe in municipal court it's possible that you could combine two, but certainly if it's a higher degree thing, you really can't. So, but these are just some of the things. People can ask you all kinds of questions, and you have to make a decision, especially if it's happened to you. Right? I'll say, my wife went to an interview. She was 3 months pregnant, and she said, I feel terrible going for this interview. I got a recruiter here. I got the employer who's going to be counting on me. What do I say? I said, you say nothing. You say absolutely nothing. Get the damn job. And then when you go out, you have your child, you stay as much as they'll allow you and you want to, and then you come back and say, that was a temporary disability, my friends, let's get back to work. It sounds odd, but it's a game with rules. You're right, and the question is, how do you deal with the fact that as soon as you don't say something, you've said something? I can't solve that for you. You better start doing a really good tap dance and explain that this, that's a problem. It's just a problem that's not going to go away. But you could say, basically the same thing about any topic like that. And by the way, if you have an employment prospect that is going to treat you illegally, you probably want to keep looking. You're not going to be, you can't hide and dodge so much that you turn yourself into, I hate this work environment. It's just not good. So just invest your time elsewhere.
I'm okay with my background check.
Actually, we're having it run. So we'll know. We'll let you know if it's still true. Heavens to Murgatroyd. Let me just say, that's legal. If that's their way of saying we want to talk with people, get this or that, I don't know what I would do, but I don't do that actually when we employ people and this and that. But I'd want to go through the interview and say, is it even worth taking the time to do? But so no, there's nothing wrong with that. Make sure you tell your references that you listed them. I've had people who did a terrible job who listed me. I'm like, if you were dumb enough to give me, I'm going to be dumb enough to tell them what happened, which, by the way, is completely legal. And there's an immunity, a good faith immunity to an employer to talk with another prospective employer to say, don't go there, type of thing. So when you ask them, can you get one?
I'm eligible to get a security clearance.
In other words, will you clear on the clearance? I don't know the answer to that. I could say for sure, if it's a federal, state, or local law enforcement type environment, national security type of thing, that rules. They're going to get what they need to get. If it's a mom and pop store or a law firm or whatever have you, I think you're putting the person on the spot, because if they're saying no thank you, that means they have something they don't want you to know. I think that's probably not okay. So, but there's no case law on that. We researched it for this program and the prior one that we did. The answer is the state has its own rule that says no can ask. You can't get a prospective state worker or municipal worker in front of you and say, tell me your present salary, your past salary, whatever. But in private employment, that principle does not exist. Now, people are talking about it. New Jersey, this past 6 months, has put in place, and we're going to get to it, a number of changes in law that are fairly surprising. I mean, we had an 8-year experience in the employment law desert for employees in the last administration. I belong to a group that regularly lobbies the legislature. They stopped going to the legislature. We're never going to get it through. Or if we do, it's going to get vetoed. So that has been talked about taking the state principle and applying it back, but it's not the law now. So there's something called at-will employment. New Jersey is an at-will jurisdiction. Most states are. What does that mean? There's actually some good news there, right? If this were indentured servitude, that's not at will. You try to leave and they pull you back and say, we own you, right? Now that doesn't happen in the 50 states. There are some places it does, and maybe in the underground this or that. But if there were a law that said you're not allowed to leave, would that trouble you? Yeah. So guess what? You can leave any day, anytime, and you can even do it for unlawful reasons. I quit because I don't like you based on race, creed, color, national origin, gender, religion, disability, whatever. You could do that. Nobody can stop you. You can leave for any reason or no reason. The flip side is the employer is allowed to release you back into the pool, but only if the reasons, even though they don't even have to articulate them, are not unlawful. The unlawful ones are race, creed, color, national origin, and all of that, right? So they're never going to say, I'm releasing you because I'm a bigot. They're going to say, bad fit. They're going to say, you don't get the culture here. They're going to say, your job changed. I had a client, it's a true story, who was out on maternity leave with the Family Medical Leave Act, protections in a big company. And while she was out, a friend at work sent her an intranet advertisement for her job. And she found out about it, and she told me. And we sued them. We were in federal court, and they settled with her. They paid her a couple of years of severance, whatever. But it's obvious that the reason they gave, your job disappeared. No, it didn't. You gave it to Billy Bob. It's like, that's wrong. They can't do that. If you're in a protected environment like that, they have to fulfill it. If you find them in a lie, you got a good case. So that's a case of, we'll talk about that. This is about terms of employment. It's still at will, meaning you can leave or they can fire you, but sometimes there can be lawful conditions on it. Now, it's not so enforceable unless they say, oh yeah, you're going to lose your certain benefits that you had, like walking away with your stock options or whatever. If they wanted to make it onerous, the answer is that's probably enforceable. We're all here over the age of 18, even Juliana. She can sign an enforceable agreement, right? Or sign, did we get you to sign the handbook acknowledgement yet?
Yeah. 4 years ago.
4 years? How old were you?
17.
On Monday morning, we're re-signing. Okay. But those are, they're quasi-contracts. And so, for example, good example, what are your rights on severance, right? You're not entitled to severance, you're not entitled to banked vacation pay, unless the company says that you are. But if they say it, they have to do it. That's basically how that is handled. Okay, Equal Pay Act and the federal law. New Jersey law now protects more categories of individuals than any jurisdiction in the country, including the feds. It has to do with genetic material and a bunch of other categories: race, creed, color, national origin, disability, gender, age, and a whole lot more. And it says basically everybody should be paid the same as everybody else for the responsibilities that you have in common. Right? We're not saying that the doctor should be paid the same as the physician's assistant. It's saying that a doctor whose responsibilities are A through Z and another doctor who's a different gender, different age, different nationality should be making around the same. And by the way, this is amazing. We have handbooks. Like I call this program the real handbook because the employer can say whatever they want, and they say some really stupid things sometimes. The bigger employers generally get it pretty right, but the smaller ones are ridiculous. So if they basically say to you, you're not allowed to talk to anybody about your compensation. You got that? No talking at the water cooler. If there is a water cooler, no talking about it anywhere. That, my friends, is illegal and unenforceable. Now, they may fire you for that. That's when you come talk to me, because we educate them.